Okay, just picture this. It's 1943. The whole world is engulfed in war. And to defeat an enemy, you really have to understand them. But what if that enemy is Adolf Hitler? Well, American intelligence actually commissioned a top-secret project to do just that, to build a psychological profile and, get inside his head. And what they found was a portrait of a mind that was totally at war with itself. So let's dive into this declassified report and see what they really uncovered. So this is the actual document. It was put together by a psychoanalyst named Walter Langer for the OSS, which was the forerunner to the CIA. And the goal here wasn't just some academic curiosity. No, this was meant to be a weapon of war. It was a serious attempt to predict Hitler's next move by understanding the man behind the monster. And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, Langer and his team couldn't exactly put Hitler on a psychiatrist's couch, so they had to piece together this psychological puzzle using speeches, writings, and interviews with people who actually knew him. They decided to analyze him from the outside in, starting with the face he showed the world. So first things first, the analysts started with the man the whole world saw, Hitler's public persona. How on earth did this one man manage to captivate millions? The report really digs into the mechanics of his almost hypnotic power, and right away it reveals a pretty fascinating contradiction. And here is that contradiction, laid out plain and simple. Physically, people who knew him described him as completely unimpressive. One person even called him the apotheosis of the little man. But the second he stepped up to a podium, he transformed. He became this vessel for an entire nation's rage and ambition. And you know what? This transformation was no accident. The report basically calls him a master showman, a theatrical performer. He would deliberately use psychology to his advantage, like holding his rallies late in the evening when people were tired and their critical thinking was at a low point. It was all about manipulation and control. The analysts used this really powerful metaphor to explain it. They wrote that Hitler acted as a loudspeaker proclaiming the most secret desires of a whole nation. So you see, he wasn't just talking at people, he was literally mirroring their own feelings right back at them. He was an emotional amplifier, and that's what made his connection with his audience so incredibly powerful. All right, let's peel back the next layer. Let's look at the private man. Because if his public persona was all about iron-fisted control, his private life, according to this report, was a mess of compulsion and chaos. This really gets to the heart of his behavioral patterns and his, well, very unstable emotional core. And this is where that image of the decisive, all-powerful leader just completely falls apart. Behind closed doors, the report paints a picture of a man ruled by his compulsions. And we're not just talking about little quirks here. The analysts saw this obsessive behavior and his crippling indecisiveness as symptoms of a really profound underlying anxiety, a total contrast to the iron will he projected to the world. And then there were the rages. I mean, get this. This is one of the most shocking descriptions in the entire report, and it was told by several informants who had witnessed his tantrums firsthand. This wasn't the controlled fury of a powerful leader. This was something else entirely. So what did the analysts make of this? They concluded that while, yeah, sometimes he might have faked his anger for dramatic effect, many of these outbursts were absolutely genuine. They saw it as clear evidence of a deeply unstable emotional core, a hypersensitivity to any kind of criticism, and a complete inability to handle frustration. This brings us to the central psychological puzzle of the whole report, these deep inner contradictions. What we see here is a man who projected this image of almost divine authority, all to mask what the analysts believed was a deeply fragile and insecure ego. This quote is really the core of the myth he built around himself. He famously claimed, "I follow my course with the precision and security of a sleepwalker." You see, in his own mind, he wasn't just a political leader, he was an instrument of providence, a man of destiny. This belief was the absolute cornerstone of his entire identity. But the reality, according to this report, was a world away from that image. On the one hand, you have him making these grandiose, almost messianic statements in public. But privately, he could be awkward, even subservient, and deeply uncomfortable around people he saw as his social superiors. It pointed to this powerful, hidden fear of being seen as weak. Yeah, so much for the sleepwalker. Beneath that confident surface, the report paints a picture of a man absolutely consumed by fear. Fear of poison, fear of betrayal, fear of looking weak. He was totally isolated, trusted almost no one, and was plagued by what one observer called a profound spiritual loneliness. So the big question is, where did all of this come from? The insecurity, the rage, the Messiah complex, where did it start? To answer that, the OSS analysts did exactly what you'd expect psychoanalysts to do. They looked at his childhood. They looked at his early conditioning. It's a really jarring image, isn't it? But for these analysts, the key to understanding the dictator in the chancellery lay in the experiences of this child. They truly believed his entire personality was basically a reaction to his formative years. The first key figure in this story was his father, Alois. In public, he was this respectable, by-the-book customs official. But at home, the report says he was a brutal tyrant who ruled the family with fear. And this created the very first major conflict in young Adolf's life. And this early instability was just hammered home by a series of traumas. First, his younger brother died, which made him the absolute center of his mother's world. Then, his tyrannical father died. And finally, when he was just a teenager, his adored mother died a really painful death from cancer, which left him utterly and completely devastated. Okay, so here it is. This is the core of the psychoanalytic argument. The analysts basically theorized that Hitler never ever resolved these intense childhood emotions. Instead, as an adult, he projected all of them onto the world stage. His personal family drama literally became the world's tragedy. And the report spells this theory out directly. It suggests that, for him, Germany was ideally suited to symbolize his mother, so was Austria ideally suited to symbolize his father. It's like, in this twisted psychological play, Germany became the beloved mother he had to save and protect, while Austria became the tyrannical father he had to dominate and conquer. Politics became his own personal therapy session, played out on a global scale. So when you pull it all together, this secret profile was this remarkable wartime effort. It peeled back all the layers of myth and propaganda to find, at the core, a deeply damaged, insecure, and contradictory man whose own personal psychological battles were being fought on a global stage, with millions of lives at stake. And that leaves us with a final, pretty chilling question to think about. This report argued that to truly understand the Third Reich, you had to understand the unresolved traumas of a single child. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often are the grand, sweeping movements of history actually shaped by the private demons of the people in power?